Hi, this is Chris Mark. Welcome to my now third podcast, February 8th, 2024. You notice I'm not wearing a hat today. I got a new camera. I had some of my friends very politely suggest that I look like an albino and, the color was washed out. So I actually went and got a better camera and a light. This is going to be a little more lighthearted. I've talked about politics the last couple of days. I've got some guests lined up, and I'm still practicing how to talk in the camera a little bit. And it really, I've done a lot of public speaking over the years, and it's a little bit different talking into a camera without the immediate feedback from a crowd or another person. So I'm having to learn that. I learned that there are certain things that I will use as fillers I never knew as I watched my videos. So I'm going to be a little more circumspect today. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today, I get a lot of questions on this. You notice my snipers podcast is called A Sniper's Perspective. And the reason I call it that is, I've been fortunate in life. If you heard my intro, I've owned a couple of companies, educated, was completing my PhD, was a recon Marine Navy officer, did a lot of things. But the one thing that seems to always resonate with people and that I have the most questions about is being a sniper. There's this mythological kind of idea of what a sniper is, apparently, and it certainly resonates. A lot of movies are made about it, stuff like that. And so people ask me all the time, Chris, what was it like to be a sniper? How did you become one? What's the training like? So, I'm going to talk about it a little bit today. Hopefully, tell some amusing stories, give you a little more insight into that strange world we call Scout Sniper. Now, on that note, in March of last year, 2023, after 80 years, the United States Marine Corps decided to disband Scout Snipers, the Scout Sniper program. Again, 80 years, had some amazing people in there. We're going to have some guests on and, subsequent podcasts are going to explain. They're a little closer to the action than I am these days. I've been out for a long time. They're going to explain why that decision was made. Whether I agree or disagree, the Marine Corps has moved in that direction. So, after 80 years, there are no more Scout Snipers. Now, are there snipers in the Marine Corps? Yes. The reconnaissance units have recon snipers. Certainly, MARSOC, the Raiders, have their own snipers. But the Scout Sniper program has gone by the wayside. So, a little bit interesting. We'll talk a little bit about it. So, how did I get involved in being a sniper? Well, I joined the Marine Corps to be a grunt. I spent the first year and a half doing what's called security forces, or what they used to call barracks duty, stationed in Naples, Italy. Exciting place. Great place to be as a young, 20-something-year-old young man. But really, all you're doing is standing guard duty. You dress in dress blues sometimes, do these things, stand guard duty, really not being a Marine. So after that, I got transitioned back to 3-6 in what's called a Victor company. So I was a grunt. So I got to come back and become a grunt. And this is when you had a lot of folks come. They just come back off deployment. So you had a lot of folks coming and going, and they were setting up the platoons and all that. And after about a month of being a quote grunt, what I was trained to do, I started going, this lifestyle is kind of boring. We do a lot of cleaning, a lot of field daying, do a lot of marching with packs. Not that really interesting, tough life, whatever. And then one day we're at formation, battalion formation. There were about 1,000 Marines there, probably close to. And back in the day, back in the 90s, black Marines would be called dark green. White Marines were called light green. So you had light to dark green Marines, right? We were trying to stay away from racism and stuff like that. This dark green Marine shows up in front of the battalion. And man, this guy he's strapped, he's jacked, and he's wearing his camis, and he walks out in front of everybody. And it's the way Marines talk to each other. And he goes, how many of you swinging dicks think you have what it takes to be a Marine Corps Scout Sniper? And I'm like, boom. And I step forward. I start looking to my left, looking to my right, and I'm like, all right, how come out of 1,000 people, there are only like 10 of us that actually step forward here? All right. And he goes, all right, tomorrow morning, 06, show up for the screening test. I'm like, screening test? Didn't know about any screening tests. I thought you just kind of volunteered. So 06 the next morning, I show up, and we have the screening test. And all battalions had their own screening test. I was in 3-6 back in the early days. And the screening test then was, I believe I'm doing this from memory. We had to run a PFT, Marine Corps PFT, which is a 3-mile run and then maximum pull-ups, maximum sit-ups in 2 minutes. The maximum score on the 3-mile run was 18 minutes. You had to run at least a 285, which means you had to do it in 21 minutes or better. And we had to wear boots. So it wasn't in tennis shoes. You had to come out in what's called boots and utes. So we ran the PFT. Then you had to run the Marine Corps obstacle course twice, back to back, within, I think, 2.5 minutes each. So you're pretty tired at this point. Then they drug us out to the pool, and we had to do a first class swim test, which basically amounts to other Marines that swim better than you trying to drown you. And if you don't drown, then you're okay. No, it's actually a swim test. You have to do 500 meters wearing full camis, side stroke, breaststroke in a certain amount of time. You have to do a bunch of these exercises. Needless to say, you get out of the pool, you've already put on a few miles, pretty exhausted. Then they hand you a sheet and you have to go do a land navigation course. I believe we had 4 hours to do it. And, the land nav was covering about 6 or 7 miles. And so you had to calculate and say, well, I'm going to have to look for these spots. So you're moving as fast as you can. So you're basically running the whole way. So you finished that. I came back. And at this point, you've put on probably about 12 miles on your feet, right? And you're getting a little bit tired. And then you sit down, you do a knowledge exercise. They ask you to, show how you can communicate, use radios, call for fire, do land navigation, mathematically, do all this kind of stuff to show that you've got the intellect to do it. And then the last thing they did is they would do what they called a sniper run or a hog run. So some of the snipers in the unit would take you out and run you through. And again, I was an East Coast Marine. So I was stationed in North Carolina, Camp Lejeune, which has a lot of swamps around it, a lot of alligators, a lot of bugs. And they would run you through the swamps. And as you're going through, they'd make you get under the water and take all that muck. If you've ever been in a swamp, that muck from the bottom, you'd have to smear it on your head and your body. You got leeches on you. And there's giant green and yellow spiders, and there's snakes. And they'd run you through that for hours. And the reason they did that is they said, look, this is your life as a sniper. If you don't like being dirty and nasty and stinky and whatever, you're not going to like it. So they'd run you like that. And then I think a couple of hours later, we've probably put in, 14, 16 miles, pretty hard miles on our feet. And, we're tested and all this kind of stuff. And then we had an interview with the platoon commander. And at the end, they said, we're either going to bring you into the platoon or we're not. And I was fortunate. They said they were going to bring me into the platoon. So I was now back in those days, they called it a STA, STA platoon, surveillance and target acquisitioning platoon. They then changed it to Scout Snipers, but back in my day, it was called STA platoon. And so every battalion had a platoon of snipers, and I believe the TO at that time. So for every battalion of infantry Marines, you had 8 snipers that were assigned to you. The school is difficult enough. Typically, battalions were lucky if they had 4 to 6 snipers, but you were, and I don't ever like to use the word elite, but, it was a unique place you could be that you were given some privileges. And, we didn't have to wear helmets and body armor and stuff like that. So I show up at the platoon, and the platoon commander says, hey, welcome to the platoon. You're probably not going to go to sniper school, even though you're an expert in shooting. You spent 1.5 years in security forces, probably not going to graduate. And I said, hey, you know what? That's fine. I'm just happy to be here. Team player. If you want me, I'll be a radio operator, whatever you need. So we're putting the teams together. I got assigned to a team. And the next week, the platoon commander comes up and says, listen, I don't know the full story. Apparently, one of the Marines that was supposed to go to Scout Sniper School could not pass his background check, or something happened. And they said, would you be willing to go? And I said, yeah, of course I would. They said, well, you're probably not going to graduate. It's a very difficult school. But if we don't send somebody, we lose that billet. So if you're willing to go and give it, a good old college try, we'll send you. And so I was like, well, I'm probably going to, get my rear end kicked, but I'll go. So started building my ghillie suit. A bunch of Marines in the unit helped me do it. I went to my sister, who is a Marine. She'll be on the show later. Keep in mind, I was young, Lance Corporal of the Marine Corps. I had no money. So I called up my sister and I said, hey, I need to borrow $200 because I got to buy all this gear. And, so she lent me the money. So I show up at sniper school. And the first day at sniper school, they have you, first of all, I didn't know there was such thing as an extra large pack, in the grunts and security forces. You got given it back in the day, they called them Alice packs or backpacks. And I had a regular size pack. When you go to the sniper unit, they give you an extra large Alice pack. I didn't know they existed, but they do. And you realize why they do exist. So I go to sniper school, and the first thing they have you do is shoot a target using a 22 caliber. It was called a 40X, a very, very high precision 22 caliber. And you got there and they say, we don't care where you hit, just shoot a group. They just want to see how consistently you can shoot. So I passed that. A couple of people were sent home, and they said, look, if you can't shoot a group with this, we cannot teach you well enough, how to shoot well enough to graduate. So I stayed. Then we had to do our first land navigation exercise to stay in the course. And I realized I was way out of my element. I got my ass kicked. I did make it back. I did pass, but boy, it was by the skin of my teeth. I got back with like 5 minutes left. And, I was very, very lucky. But there was a sergeant there. His name was Sergeant Carr, Mike Carr, and he'll be on this show. And it's on a podcast with him recently. He retired as a gunner after 30 years. So I was a young lance corporal. He was a sergeant, and he stayed up with me, helping remediate me on land navigation and get me ready and everything else. Without his help, I never would have graduated. So sniper school is unique. I've been through a lot of training. As a recon Marine, I was a recon instructor. I've been through, Pathfinder, Airborne, dive school, Hearstmaster, SOC programs, urban sniper, and all of this. And people have asked me, they're like, what's the most difficult military school? Well, physically, there's certainly more difficult schools. I thought recon school, amphibious recon as a school, physically was more difficult. I mean, they run you to the dive school, very difficult. Academically, Pathfinder school, which they don't have anymore, the Army Pathfinder school, very difficult academically. But in terms of the one school that challenged you across the board on everything, man, it's got to be Scout Sniper School. So when I went through, it was a 12-week school. To put that in perspective, Marine Corps boot camp is only 12 weeks. Infantry school back in the day was only 6 weeks. So you're going through a 12-week school just to learn this one job. You have to run everywhere you go. But the one thing that gets you is at that point, they had 29 skills that you had to master. And in the Marine Corps, mastering a skill means that you score 80% or better, which means on any one of those 29 skills, if you didn't achieve an 80% when you were tested, they sent you home. And every morning you would show up, and there's some Marine doing the, Seabag drag. And I say Marine, they had, folks from other services in there with us as well. Very, very difficult. And to give you an idea, some of the things that you would be required to master, there's something called KIMS games. And KIMS is an acronym that means keep in mind sniper, or what we used to say is keep in mind stupid. So you show up, 06 in the morning, getting ready for your day to go. And they have a table, and it's covered with a poncho liner, which, or a poncho, which is just a cover. You show up, you're standing around it. They pull that poncho liner off. And they give you 2 minutes to look at the table. And they've got various things set out on the table. They may have a cartridge. They may have a magazine from a pistol. They may have, a compass. They may have a protractor. They may have, it doesn't matter. They just will put, about 15 things on that table, little things. You have 2 minutes, and then they cover it up. You go about your day. So you work, all day, all night, whatever. And then later on, they pull you in and they say, okay, take out a sheet of paper, write down everything you saw this morning on that table. And here we are, 8, 10, 12, 18 hours later, exhausted. And the last thing that you can remember is, I think I saw, an M16 firing pin sitting on the table. But you have to write it down. If you can't do that with 80% accuracy, you're sent home. One of the other things that they would do, it's called observation exercises. They would put you in front of a tree line, and the instructors would go back, and they would put things in the tree line. They may put a knife, a K-bar sticking straight in a tree. So when you're looking at it through optics, 25 yards away, all you can see is, the pommel of that knife, the end of that knife, and even only part of that because it's covered by branches. They may put a cartridge in a tree. They may hang a protractor, canted at you. I mean, but the tree line has all these tiny little things, and you're required to go out there using a spotting scope, start scanning that tree line and pick up these tiny little objects. And you have to draw them. You have to draw what they are and tell the instructors what they are. And again, if you can't score an 80%, you're sent home. And there are some people that just don't have the observational and perceptive, abilities to do this. And so that's why it was so hard. It's one thing if you say, hey, you've got to run 4 miles in 28 minutes. If you run enough, you'll probably get in shape enough you can do that. The shooting was extremely difficult, but it was those things that are not innate to people. Range estimation. We'd have to go out and do range estimation within a certain percentage of accuracy. And if you can't do it that well, you're sent home. So it required a lot of things that just were not innate and could not necessarily be learned through instruction. You just either had the ability or you didn't. Shooting certainly is critical to be a sniper. And, when you go out there and they teach you how to shoot and you spend a lot of time shooting, but, the instructors out there shooting as a sniper is different than going to your local range. When you're out there, you got to carry everywhere in sniper school, you're carrying a pack, right? And it's got a sandbag in it. So you're carrying about 40, 50 pounds on top of your water and everything else. Plus the rifle with the scope is almost 16 pounds. And you have to run everywhere. And you've got a sniper buddy you have to be with. So you're running just exhausted. And when you get to the range and you're doing the shooting, the instructors aren't like, hey, take your time, relax, let's shoot. It's North Carolina, June. I was there in June. It's 100 degrees. You're wearing full camis. You're sweating. You're tired. You got cami paint on. You've been running all day. Your heart rate is pounding. You're trying to shoot. And then when you shoot, for example, at 500 yards, the instructors get you up and they make you run, 200 yards to get you back down and shoot again. So, everything in there is about stress and they keep you up. It's early mornings, late nights. So anyways, you show up at sniper school. The days are typically, 12 to 18 hours long. Brutal. The ticks out there are just unbelievable. It was illegal at the time, may still be, to spray for ticks because it was killing a certain hummingbird. So the ticks out there are unbelievable. And if memory serves, we had about 7 or 8 guys in our class that got Lyme disease. So every night when you'd come back, you'd strip down your buddies, you'd check them, they'd check you for ticks. And there was one day I had, no kidding, 29 ticks on me from being out in the weeds. And so you get ticks everywhere. And so that's tough. And you're doing these really, really tough evolutions. You get up in the morning, you've got all your stuff, you have to run, you go to chow, you hit the classroom, you may have a test or two, right? You're up all night studying. We have a lot of academics in sniper school. Then you start your evolution. It may start with land navigation, it may start with Kim's games, depending on the phase you're in. You may go to the rifle range. You do all of this kind of stuff. You get back at night. Now, one of the things, and I'll tell you, hopefully a couple of amusing stories because, it's long days, tough days, you're losing a lot of folks, but, you try to make it kind of lighthearted and fun. So a lot of land nav. So you have to do night land navigation. And the land navigation is out in the swamps of North Carolina, in the woods of North Carolina. Now, it's Stone Bay, where old sniper school used to be. It's now where the Marine Raiders base is. Now, back when I was in sniper school, the only thing out there were 3 buildings. You had the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School on the East Coast. You had a little E club, an enlisted club called Maggie's Drawers, which is a flag you would get if you missed the target. It's called Maggie's Drawers. And you had the custodial, the correctional custodial unit. So if you were a Marine that got in trouble, they would say, we've got a choice for you. You can either get court-martialed or in trouble, or you can go here. And basically you'd be sent there. And all day, from morning to night, you would take a hammer and make big rocks into little rocks. But it didn't go on your permanent record. So they had that, sniper school, Maggie's Drawers. Then they had all the ranges. They had Hathcock Range, Thousand Yard Range. So you'd have to do a lot of land navigation. Obviously, being able to navigate, in the woods is important for a sniper. And, I'm not going to say snipers cheat, but, okay, you try to cheat. So they had night land navigation. The night land navigation was, I think you had about 4 or 5 hours to complete it. And it wasn't very difficult, or when I say difficult, it was not a hugely long course. I've done courses that took, a couple of days. This one was only about 4 or 5 hours at a time. So you'd go through your whole day. And of course, they'd wait until it's nighttime. And you'd have to go out and do night land nav in the woods, in the swamps of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Well, they would give you what's called a shackle sheet. It's a little encoded sheet. I won't go into too much detail, but it basically, when you would find the ammo can, you'd open it up and it'd have a code in there, and you would look at that code compared to your shackle sheet, write down a new code, and then they would know you didn't cheat. Because if you went out there and used somebody else's shackle sheet, it would not match up with what yours should have said. So it kept you from cheating. So to get from the schoolhouse to where the land nav started was about, I don't know, I think it was about a mile and a half, run. You could have walked if you wanted to, not allowed to walk, but if you really wanted to take your time, you're probably not going to finish your land nav. So they start you off and you run out there, you get to your point and you start shooting your azimuths, off you go. So, you do this 6, 7 times. So the last time we're out there, been up all day, already put in 12 hours. You're tired, your back hurts, your feet hurt, you got blisters, you're hungry, you're sweaty, been eaten by bugs. So we run out there. It's already dark, and I realize I reach in my pocket. I don't have a shackle sheet. I'd left it back with my gear. So I'm already a mile and a half run in. So I got no choice. Turn around. Here we go. Run back. Grab my shackle sheet, put it in my pocket. So now I'm 3 miles in. Haven't even started land nav. Turn around again. Here I go, running back. Well, at this point, starting to see some Marines come back. They'd already aced their land nav. Not a big deal. So it's now probably, 10 p.m., swamps, North Carolina. Now I got to find all these points by myself in the middle of the swamps in North Carolina. Now, here's the thing. You can say what you want about not being scared of the dark. When you're in the swamps of North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, by yourself in the middle of the night, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, and nobody else is out there, you start thinking maybe there are some boogeymen out here. So anyways, I'm out there, I'm finding all my posts, pitch black, and there was one post I had to find, right? And it had an ammo can, you had to open it up, get the little code out. And I knew this one because I'd found it before. And it was a 50 meters in the middle of this swamp. So here I'm like, man, there are alligators. I'm out here by myself. So I'm looking, I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I run out there, open it up, get my coat. I'm coming back. I'm soaking wet. I'd been up to my waist in water. Well, one of the other sniper students had seen me out there and he had a plan. So he waited for me and he was hidden behind a tree. So I'm coming back thinking I'm absolutely alone in the middle of the swamps. I'd finish this. All I have to do is turn it in, get a couple hours sleep before the next evolution. And as I get out of the swamp, I just go, let that big exhale. I'm like, right on. I'm done. Got it. I step around a tree and all I feel are hands grab me by the legs, go, bah! Now, here's what I'll say. I'm not proud of this moment. Have you ever heard a 6-year-old girl scream at the top of her lungs when she's afraid? Yeah, it pretty much sounded like that at that moment. He scared the absolutely bejesus out of me. And, in hindsight, of course, he told everybody. And, I have to admit, he got me. But, man, he scared the ever-living dog shit out of me. And then we, ran back and handed our stuff in. And, of course, it was all fun and games. And to this day, I'm still friends with guys who went to sniper school, and they still tell that story. But, so sniper school is tough. And, one of the toughest things is every morning you'd meet in the classroom. And again, you'd have some tests or, whatever, and they'd say, okay, here's training evolution for the day. And as you're in there, they would call in and say, hey, I want to see Smith or Jones or whomever. And Smith or Jones would walk into the hooch with the instructors and you wouldn't see them again. And they'd be sent on their way. They would, be sent on their way and didn't make the cut. And again, you have to maintain an 80% in 29 different things. And some of these are really difficult. Some of the stuff you can learn, land navigation with enough practice, you can get good enough at it. But like Kim's games, observation games, land navigation, or, range estimation, some of that stuff is just tough. The academics were brutal. So after a full day, 14, 16 hours, whatever, you've only got maybe 6, 8 hours left until the next training evolution when you're not actually out in the field overnight. And guess what you're doing all night? You're up all night studying because you've got written tests. And so if you fail those, you get sent home as well. And probably the most difficult part, aside from the range, so you go to the range and you qualify from 300 yards to 1,000 using civilian. It's a 308. It's a 7.62 by 51. And certainly the rifles in the last 30 years have come miles. Back in our day, it was still We didn't have shooting computers, didn't have any of that. So you're calling the wind by yourself. You've got a sniper partner. You're having to look at the mirage. You're having to gauge the temperature, the humidity, do all the math by yourself and shoot. And from 300 yards, you'd have movers, pop-ups, stop and goes and all that. And then at 1,000 yards, you're just shooting to see if you can hit. And you probably lose about a 30-year class because some people just cannot be taught to shoot well enough to, sorry guys, my allergies get me, cannot be taught to shoot well enough to qualify at 1,000 yards. I qualified my last shot at 1,000 yards. The target's coming up and 6 inches below the bottom of that target. If I had missed that, I would have gone home, but I made it. So I got to stay. So that was one of the most difficult things. And then you go through what's called the stalking phase. Now, stalking, movies love to show this. And then when you go into stalking, you're wearing a ghillie suit, you're cammied up, you got the whole thing going, you got your rifle with you, you can bring a drag bag. And in essence, the instructors are sitting up on trucks, right? We used to use 5-ton trucks, but they're high trucks. So imagine a truck that, is a little more than head height, 6.5 feet tall or whatever the bed. The instructors are up there. They've got binoculars, they've got spotting scopes, and these are professional snipers. These are professional observers. These guys can see anything. And you are in a fairly, think about when you see the power lines by the highway and all the grass is cut down. That's basically what you're doing. And you have to creep up within about 150 yards of these guys without being caught. And then you have to take 2 shots. You're using blanks, but the instructors have what they call walkers. So they got dudes with radios. And if they see movement, they'll get on the radio and they'll say, hey, walker, I want you to run, 30 yards to your front, turn left to run 10 yards. Do you see a sniper, right, or a student? And if they catch you, you're kicked out. Or not kicked out, but you fail that evolution, right? If they don't, then you keep going. And, these guys are really professional. So you have to, you've got 4 hours, you're creeping, you're crawling, you're doing everything you can, you're eating dirt, you're getting stung by bugs, it's hot as hell. And so you get within 150 yards and, you get your rifle set up and you can see just part of that instructor. And what happens? You take a shot, boom. Well, now they can hear it. Everybody knows what's going on. So now the instructor starts looking because they heard where the shot came from. They get the walkers. And if they can't see you, they tell the walkers, they say, hey, get within, and I think back in the day, it was like, get within 10 feet of the shooter. So the walker will get somewhere within a 10-foot diameter. He's not going to look at you and say, here's where he is. It's just going to be within 10 feet of you. And you're completely still. And the walker's not trying to give you away, right? They still can't see you. They'll say, all right, get within 3 feet. And they'll let them move within 3 feet. And they'll say, okay. Now they'll say, tell him to take another shot. So now you're looking at this guy that is essentially staring back at you with a high-powered scope, and he can see you, and you have to take another shot. And if you take that shot and they can't see you, they'll tell the walker, they're like, take your hand and place it on their head. And they put it down, and then they make you stand up. And if they haven't seen you, you get 10 points. So the idea is that you have to average 7 points, which means you have to get at least 1 shot off before you're caught, but you have to get at least 1 perfect 10, which is what I just described. So it's extremely difficult to do. A lot of guys get caught. A lot of people get, kicked out. Creeping around in the woods like that is not trivial. You've got to be very, very careful. I mean, these instructors are very good. If you're camouflage, I've seen them, they caught me once because I put some natural vegetation in my ghillie suit, but I had one of the leaves turned around the wrong way. And he said, I could see it was facing the wrong way, and it gave off a shine, and they caught you. So, I mean, these guys are really, really good. But we had one guy in our sniper school, and I won't give his name, but he was so good. He scored 7 perfect 10s in a row. He was just a country boy from Virginia. I mean, absolutely amazing. So, of course, we have 3 more stalks to do. He did a couple of them. The last one, he's like, he comes to the class, and he goes, I got an idea. He's like, I'm so good. I'm going to stalk naked. So he puts his ghillie veil on, cammies his face, cammies his junk, is wearing boots, and he's out there stalking, right? He gets caught immediately by the instructors. And of course, they're pissed. They bring him up to so for the next 3 hours, every time I pick up my scope and I'd look at the instructors, all I would see is this naked student up there doing jumping jacks and push-ups in all of God's glory with this stuff just flailing. So yeah, you have some funny times. So if you get through that, you do graduate. and you become a sniper. The school is extremely difficult, to be honest. And what's really in my mind interesting, and I've had a lot of people, there tends to, the movies tend to show snipers as being these, lonely guys that live their life, knuckle dragging troglodytes. In reality, the people that are attracted to that kind of world that want to be snipers tend to be the more intellectual people. They tend to be kind of nerdy because a lot of math goes into the ballistics and a lot of stuff like that. So you tend to get more intellectual people that do that. And I was asked to write a review of American Sniper right before it came out by National Review. You can find it online. I'll post a link to it. And they called me up and said, "Hey, we'd like you to do a review of the movie." Well, I had some friends that were still sniper instructors. They sent me an advanced copy of the movie. I watched it. And so I called National Review and I said, "You know what? I'd prefer not to do a review of the movie, prefer to talk about how maligned snipers are. We tend to be viewed as these heartless, knuckle draggers. In reality, we tend to be kind of intellectual people, very smart. And in the Marine Corps sniper community, we've got some great guys. We've got authors, we've got doctors, we've got people like me in cybersecurity getting graduate degrees. We've got a lot of smart people. And in my sniper unit back in the 1990s, all the people I went to school or that I was served with, about half of them now have master's degrees. I mean, very, very smart people. So again, we tend to be maligned. It can be a tough job, but it's a great job. So that really is kind of sniper school and how I got involved in it. I wouldn't change it for anything. People have asked me all the stuff I've done in the military and in life. The greatest job I've ever had. You get to work virtually independently or in very, very small teams. You get to write a lot of times your own missions and you're going out there. It's not for everybody because you have to be confident in working without your very heavily armed brothers and sisters out there, making sure they can take care of you. You're out there basically by your own wile and guile trying to stay alive, which, can be a little bit, terrifying. I know people are looking and going, "Hey, you wear glasses." Believe it or not, until I was 45, never had to have glasses. So I didn't have glasses. It is having good eyesight. It's great as a sniper. Unfortunately, when you turn 45, your eyesight goes down. So that's where I am. So that is, Sniper 101, Sniper School, and why this is called A Sniper's Perspective. Great job. But that seems to be the one thing everybody's most interested in. So if you have any questions, certainly feel free to text me, email me, call me, whatever. I'd be more than happy to talk about a sniper's life. Thank you.